wanted to know which planet was causing your suffering? How about Earth?
Hey everyone, Felix here, back with another Eternal Return video. For today's video, we'll be going over the pre-season 2 patch notes, otherwise known as patch 1.7. Obviously, I'm still sick, so I'll be speaking softer, and hopefully you guys don't mind that too much. Unfortunately for my voice, there is a lot to go through, so I'll try and go through it quickly, but, you know, I'll be skipping notes here and there, and I'll be pointing out things that I think might be interesting if I think they deserve the notice. So anyways, let's hop right into it. I'll scroll past the first few things. First major thing is the Battle Pass theme for the season, which is going to be Battle Maids. We do have Fiora, Aya, Bernice, and Rozzi. I believe Fiora is the skin that's only available through the actual pass purchase, so like the really expensive package. It looks pretty nice, so I might buy it myself. To get on with the actual system updates, we do have a pretty nice quality of life update that we've been asking for forever, which is looting from multiple corpses with one click of the button. So very, very nice from no one to do that, and we do have the escape votes finally in the game. So basically, if you have 2 people vote for the escape, you can now hop into the abandoned dock, but if you obviously have a majority against, then that won't happen. And then, yep, we do have the escape area being highlighted now with green, if you guys didn't know where the abandoned dock was before. So with that aside, we do have an update to the launchpad animation. Your character will now do a little run in the air instead of standing still and T-posing. Very cute, and they will be adding a lot of pings to the game. I'll let you guys pause and read the pings for yourselves, but essentially it is just more information when you ping, so you can like ping more things. So have some fun playing around with that. Obviously the patch notes will be linked in the description, so you can check yourself, but honestly, people usually ping on the way and stuff anyways, so if you want to ping random things later on, I'm sure you'll find that ability as you play the game. Another big update to quality of life is going to be the remote drone toggle, which is really nice because I would accidentally call in leather a lot by accident. So seeing this makes me very happy. And then we now have better UI for yourself when you are eliminated, so that you can backseat a little bit better while you're waiting around for your teammates. And then we have a bunch of other UI costs. We have a pretty big ranked entry cost change where it will be more expensive to rank higher and higher up until Mythical. It will now be cheaper. So basically this is trying to limit the amount of, I guess, like glut that was in Diamond 4 last season. A lot of people complained, and obviously if you guys were one of the people that found it a bit of a struggle to get into Diamond 4, unfortunately this will impact your climb a good amount, but I think it is better for the health of the game just because Diamond 4 did end up being the most populated rank, which is obviously wrong if you're trying to go for an average ranked population curve. But all that aside, we now have the system to actually see your masteries in the character select, which we've been asking for years, and the tab screen will have a bit more information. So more changes to the gameplay. We do have temporary zone improvements. Basically, they're trying to make it harder for your third party once the final zones start, just because it was really annoying before. Basically, you won't be able to see if the other zones being fought for. This is a change that's we've been waiting for like 2 years, unironically, so it took a while, but it's finally here, and just making it more friendly to play the final zone just because ABCs weren't very fun, and people want to have more fair temporary final zones, as fair as you can get them, considering that they can be complete cluster etc's when it gets down to it. And then going on, we do have better shared mastery for slaying wild animals. So basically, if you guys have ever played supports, you'll notice that when you let someone else take all the animals down for you, you'll fall really far behind really quickly. And this is just equalizing that purely because it was kind of unfun to be at weapon mastery 12 when your character is at 20. So just balancing out a little bit, and then same thing along those lines, the experience gain catch up will be a lot easier just because of, you know, the acceleration as well, just to make games more fun for everybody involved instead of just the carries. And we have battle zone changes, just increasing a bit just so that you have to play more aggressively because people would rat in the battle zones and then let people fight it out and then come and clean it up and win, which was pretty annoying. And then kiosk improvements, you now have to wait a lot less time for the box to come in, which will make it more convenient and reduce the chance of third parties. We now also have a bit of adjustments with wild animals and traps. Traps you can only now place 2 of instead of 3, and boars can now drop 2 meat, which will be important later on when we get down to the augments, which you see right here. Healing reduction will now be streamlined across both melee and ranged, meaning that there is no difference. It felt pretty bad to play ranged characters before because you would have a 10% weaker heal cut, but now it will just be the same across the board and you don't have to worry about auto attacking or using skills. You will just get the heal cut and you damage them in general. Now we have the augment revamps. Essentially, Adrenaline is being streamlined to be a bit more powerful early game and then goes back to its original strength later on you go. There's a new sub-augment for Adrenaline called Open Wounds, which is a very small bleed every 8 seconds when you hurt somebody. And then Carnivore, which is a new replacement for some random augments they're removing from the Havoc subtree, is going to give you a lot more HP when you eat meat, which is what I was talking about with the boar earlier. Endorphin is going to be the replacement for Spirit Pulling, just making it a lot easier for you to get your SP up and maintained, and its Mental Goliath is getting a very big nerf. With all that said, they are going to be removing Frenzy, which was a previous active or core augment for Adrenaline, which is like the attack speed buff you got when you used your weapon skill. Vengeance, which was useless the moment they brought it out, and Stopping Power just to reduce the overall time to kill. For the blue tree, otherwise known as Fortification, we do have Diamond Shard getting a pretty good buff. We have a new sub-augment called Camping Guide, where you can get 1 portable campfire a day. And then you also get a buff to the golden/purple ingredients from harvesting potatoes or fishing spots. Cavalcade is also getting a pretty heavy nerf in my opinion. Basically, this is a nerf in every situation because you can no longer fight with allies, and the total amount of reduction you have in general is a lot lower. So if you had a 3v3 straight up, you would have 7.5% reduction, and now you have to be around only enemies to get 6%, which is only a theoretical 1.5% increase. Now obviously in the 1v1 it will be pretty nice, but this is a squads game now, so the 1v1 is not as important. Unwavering Mentality is the replacement for Assembly and also moved to the blue tree, and now it's a personal shield that is a lot more effective, but only shields yourself, so no more AoE shields in that regard. Bitter Retribution is getting a bit of a rework. It will now give you damage reduction depending on how many stacks you have, but will deal a lot less damage. And then Oblivion Can Wait, Reinforced Armor, Dull Blades, and Steadfast will all be removed. Oblivion Can Wait, obviously very useless main augment, and then the other three were pretty strong, well outside of Reinforced Armor, so Nimble Neuron is going ahead and reducing those as well. For the support tree, we do have Healing Drone being reworked to becoming a auto-activate when you're dropping below 40% HP, and it will be, I think, slightly stronger for that as well. I think it is less healing over time, but it is a better burst heal, which is pretty important. And then Amplification Drone is now becoming universal, and so now your skill damage in general will deal more instead of just amp characters. So if you're somebody like Leon, where your auto attacks, your passive rather, with true damage, you will benefit less from amp drone, but any other character that does have skill damage in general will get much better mileage out of it. So for example, Daniel, Glavion, even Dylan, all of characters have access to amp drone if they want to run it. Thrill of the Hunt, I believe, is a sub-augment. It is essentially run it back, but it is now a sub-augment, which is pretty funny considering that they're moving a main augment and nerfing it a good amount to become a sub-augment. I don't know if this is really that good, but it is pretty useful just because you'll get a lot more movement speed as you kill stuff randomly and give you a lot of healing in case your character is an Echion and you can't stay topped off after every camp. They're also reworking Urban Warfare to become kind of like the Isol passive. They're also removing that passive from Isol, by the way, but basically you can now install traps much more quickly, and you can get one more trap up to the previous cap of 3. Logistics no longer gives you food, it gives you cameras instead, which is nice, and then Run It Back, Thea, and Head Starter have all been removed. New Tac Skills and Tactical Reworks are also on the table. I think this is pronounced the Strider. Basically, it's a movement speed buff that fades the moment you hit somebody, and when you hit somebody, you do a ton of damage. The level 3 enhancement will slow them for 2 seconds, so basically the idea is that you use it as an escape tool or a chase tool, and if you enhance it all the way, you get a bit of a bonus once you hit somebody. It is up to a question whether it's any damage or just auto attacks. Depending on whether or not it is only auto attacks will really affect its efficacy for a lot of characters, because you don't really want to proc it instantly. If you have an aura ability, that would be pretty annoying, so if it's only autos, I think it'll be really good, but if it's any damage, I think it'll be rather whatever. Soul Stealer is getting a rework. Basically, it's just a generic buff, but you can't run multiple of them, which didn't happen much in NA, but I assume was a problem in Korea. Electric Shift is getting half a meter added, so it'll be very good. And Quake is getting a rework to its level 3 module enhancement. Now, there's a massive AoE, I guess like slam when you level it up. or rather, yeah, you level it up instead of this persistent AoE that pops up every 5 meters. I think it's a pretty big buff because you can combine these with teammates, and it might be pretty silly very quickly. We'll have to see what they do with that. Protocol Violation is getting a rework as well. Basically, it's being much faster to activate, but it's a pretty big nerf overall to both its HP, well, just its HP really, so it'll probably still be really good, but you'll definitely notice how less tanky you are with using it. Nullification is also getting a minor rework, getting a much longer cooldown, but also giving movement speed when you pop it, and Blasting Bullet, the Blasting Who, has been removed. So moving on to character changes, we do have Nadine getting a very tiny attack power nerf, and her passive now applies to test subjects as well. Nathapon is getting a passive movement, I guess, from his, like, basically the damage amp from Ly Anh Q is now moved to his passive, so I don't know if Nathapon maxed both these at the same time, but basically, if Nathapon maxed passive really slowly, that's just moving his power spike a bit later in the game. Debi and Marlene is now getting a slight buff with her crit damage now applying to crit strike chance, which will make crit builds maybe viable, I really doubt it, and Rozzi is getting a +2 AP buff. Rio is also getting a kind of AP rework, is overall a buff, especially in the early game, and Bernice is getting a long-awaited change to his passive to make it a lot less fluid and make him kite a lot more easier. Like shot his Q, also getting a bit more damage. I assume all of these damage adjustments are just whether Nimbuneron thinks the character had too much burst or too little burst, so we'll notice that a lot as we go down. Bianca is getting a pretty big buff, honestly. I didn't think Bianca was that bad, but basically her W cooldown is getting much shorter, and her ultimate, which usually locks her out channels, can now have Blink, Electric Shift, which are both the movement options, and then Totem be activated. So if you want to burst on Bianca in the past, you could often kill her if she misused her ultimate, but now with Totem, you can't really do that, so we'll see how strong she is after the patch. Celine is getting pretty minor damage buffs. I guess her damage was a little bit low. More like a damage rework. Her amp's gone up, her Q's gone down, but her passive also gone up, so kind of really whatever in my opinion. Xiukai is getting a minor rework with his E2, which is the body slam into the ground after his very long dash. Instead of reducing armor, it will now slow for a pretty good amount. He also got a 40 HP buff, which is nice. Shoichi is getting a rework as well. His ultimate is going to go up a bit in damage, very little, but his W spam and his passive are being nerfed just because Nimbuneron thought he was doing too much, at least in Korea, obviously. And Suwa, once again, is on the patch notes, but nothing's really happening. They're making very tiny adjustments to her healing at minimum and maximum HP. I don't think you'll notice this at all, being a Suwa player or playing in Suwa, so I don't know why they dedicate so much text to it. Sissela is getting buffed pretty hard. Her Q and E are now free of movement, like you don't have to cast animation at all, so you can just walk and cast, and her Q is going to get a lot more damage in scaling. I guess technically, no, yeah, her Q just massively buffed. If you guys didn't play before 1.0, then you wouldn't know this, but her Q used to function like Oriana Q from League of Legends, where the pass-through and the arrival would do damage. Now it's going back to that, so Sissela is getting pretty massive buffs, which is a little scary. Adriana is getting a similar treatment to Nathapon, where her damage and skills are being moved around a little bit. Basically, her early game is going to be a bit worse because you always max passive first, and having the better oil trail damage matter a lot more early game, but now you will do a lot more damage late game with your oil trail. Honestly, it is a pretty significant amount, plus 50 damage per half second is a lot, but it's so late in the game, I'm not sure how it will look. We'll see though. Abigail, also getting a minor damage buff because I think her axes are being nerfed, so her second spin and her auto attack power with her AP is being bumped up a little bit. Pistol Aya Amp is getting a massive buff, where her Q is now 6 meters instead of what her pistol auto range was, which was definitely less than 6 meters, so Aya mains rejoice. Isol, again, passive rework due to the new trap sub-augment in the green tree. He's becoming a bit tankier, his Q is a bit safer, his W does slightly less damage when he's playing Amp in exchange for having more damage on his ultimate, and also more damage on his E, now getting a bonus chunk when he used the first auto after using it. So Isol might become a lot stronger after this patch just because his ultimate might actually do something now. Isaac is getting a pretty massive buff in terms of base AP and obviously slight nerf. Actually no, Isaac is getting a nerf overall completely. I think his early game is like barely better, but his late game will be much worse. So we'll see how that really affects him. I know Korea and I really hated his existence, so might be okay. Alonso is getting across the board buffs, except for his E, which is now shorter leash range, so people that want to get away can now get away a bit easier. But with all this aside, he is getting better base numbers on his stats, his Q, and his ultimate. So we'll see if he's actually a good character after that. Estelle is getting a pretty good buff to her AP if she autos. Her Q is also getting buffed. Basically, all the axe characters are getting buffs to make their axe skills a bit, or their axe in general, a bit worse. Aiden is getting a bit of a quality of life update where his, overcharge, which is his range form, is becoming more accessible, just because people like stay in melee range of him, which would be really annoying because the entire point of playing Aiden is to hit that peak damage output. And if there was like a melee like Hyunwoo on you, you couldn't do that. So just a bit of quality of life in that regard. William, following the trend of all the other attackers, is also getting buffed. And Yuki is getting a mild rework where his W can now give you the value no matter what instead of being cancelled randomly, which I know a lot of Yuki players were annoyed by. Irem is getting a very small nerf, and then Ava also getting a pretty small nerf overall, a bit less damage on her small ticks and then a bit more damage on the pop. Well, not even more damage, just a nerf overall, not a big deal. And then Ly Anh in Season 2, when that comes out, is going to be able to actually craft, gather, and do other stuff while possessed, which is going to be a nice quality of life for her when that releases. 11 is just being buffed, which is really odd because she was literally the best character in the game, like by far. So basically her changes are her passive, now gives you a slider when you hit skills with her. Her Q, W, and E all get refunded. Get her cooldown refunded when it's forcibly cancelled. So in the past, if you cancel those abilities, it'd be full cooldown, but now she gets them half back, which is very terrifying. Her Q will do just a bit less damage. 6% less HP scaling is nothing to scoff at. However, in return, you get insane damage on her W, like that 6% HP that you missed out on. Your Q is now on your W, and it's also amped when you charge it up all the way. Crazy. Her ultimate now also has an aura back, which does, again, more additional HP damage. So 11 will now do a lot of passive damage instead of being forced to hit her Q, which was probably the main skill, like damage aspect of her kit. So don't know why they're buffing the strongest character in the game, but that is the reality we live in. Zahir is being nerfed. Rozzi is being nerfed because of Wokege buffs, and then his Q and R are being adjusted a little bit. I think they're overall damage nerfs just because they don't like how much he spammed, but we'll see. I don't think he was that big of a problem, but moving on. I guess how the numbers better than I do, obviously. Jackie is being nerfed preemptively in anticipation for attack range increases. Camilo is being nerfed a little bit as well because he was overperforming for the back half of Season 1, and Nina is getting a very small attack speed increase just to make her feel a bit better to use. Chiara is getting a pretty good buff in my opinion. Her Q is usually maxed last, and in general you get -1 cooldown, which is huge. Her W is going to be a bit stronger overall, and her ultimate is getting quality of life change where if you ult too late, you will still get the reset anyways. Tazia is getting a pretty solid rework as well. She will be baseline more tanky, but you are losing the ability to knock back multiple times with her enhanced Q, which is a really important part of her kit. She will be getting more damage on her W, and I think more damage on her Q for it, but it's really hard to undersell how impactful that reduced crowd control is in general. Felix is getting +7 damage to his spear in anticipation for his weapon, as well as Priya getting more due to the nerfs to her weapons. Piolo will be getting a mild rework. His HP is going to be nerfed a pretty good amount in exchange for having a spammable shield on his ultimate, so overall he should be more durable, and also obviously opens up healing factor for him. Heart has been buffed for some reason. I don't know if her guitars have been nerfed, but this is a pretty flat early game buff, and also overall AP buff when she was already quite good. I think she fell off a bit later on in Korea because everyone swapped to Nadine, but it is what it is. Hyunwoo is getting arguably reworked. His Q will now speed you up and be on a bit of a long cooldown, and his E will stun a bit less, but I heard that his ultimate is stronger because you can tap it and cast much sooner, so we'll see how this works out for Hyunwoo players overall. Hyejin is getting a buff. Basically her passive is being reverted to the 0.9 fear duration it was at the beginning of 1.0, and also I think damage upon hit means when you proc it. I don't think it means per fear stack, which would be really strong. So she gets more damage overall. She does lose a bit of her damage from her ultimate, but -10% amp versus +30% total on her passive. It all adds about to be the same, if not above late game. That aside, we do have a bunch of attack range increases. Glove, bat, hammer, dagger, dual sword, rapier, and BF prosthetic will all have a longer reach. Molten Malachite, my only weapon I enjoyed playing on Jenny, has been moved to a legendary. I think this is actually arguably a nerf, just because you would you're really only getting plus 10 AP, I think, after all said and done with the buffs, with the rework. So you're losing movement speed, you're losing attack speed. It's becoming a legendary item. You do gain a bit of attack range, but you're only getting plus 10 AP for all this other stats you lose. So very weird change there. Divine Fist will now have some HP in exchange for skill amp. Frost Petal Hand has been buffed to have 15%. Clone reduction, and Bloody Hand will now have 15% clone reduction. The Frost Petal Hand change is really weird because Permafrost is still at 10%, so you're losing a lot of CDR for upgrading there. Guitars are being reworked for Priya. Getting 10% more CDR will be really nice, especially since that means you will only need glacials for max CDR. With Priya's helmet, Teen Spirit is getting buffed. That's the upgrade. Why are they buffing Heart? That's so weird. But anyways, Purple Haze is also getting buffed, as well as Captain Pepper, which I believe is also another weapon. So basically buffs overall to guitar. Daggers are getting, I think, not really changed that much. Yeah, I don't know why they preemptively nerfed Jackie for that, but basically Damascus Steel Thorn is getting a bit more AP, Carwin is being rounded up, Highlander Dirk is being less tanky, which is the amp dagger, and Eclipse is getting buffed a little bit, which is the upgraded amp dagger. Something I didn't explain earlier is that they're rounding all CDR up to multiples of 5%, which makes it funny that Eclipse was changed to just have a plus 5% buff. So interesting. BMAX is being nerfed because it was a very strong upgrade early on. Scythe, which is the auto attack weapon I believe, is getting minus 10 AP, which is huge. And Paradise Lost is getting a very tiny buff just to make the distinction between BMAX and Paradise Lost a bit bigger. And Scarlet Scythe, which is the Blood Axe I believe, minus 10 AP, very odd, but it is an amp axe, so you probably don't care as much for it. XCR, which is the Healing Cut amp assault rifle I believe, is getting a mild buff to spells, and if you auto with it, which you rarely do with Haze, it will be a slight nerf in that regard. And then for rapiers, a lot of rounding. Red Panther, which was the amp heal cut weapon, is being nerfed a little bit in HP and auto attack efficiency. And Esprit is being buffed a little bit. The attack range nerf isn't a big deal because you got a lot of it back with the general buffs. And yeah, looks like I have Argos and Meteor Claymore have been tuned down a little bit. Hammer is being reworked to be a lot longer, to make it easier to hit with, I guess, longer range abilities. Fang Mace now has a little upgrade with healing reduction attached to it, and Dagda loses another 10 AP, which is pretty big for characters like Magnus. Weight of the World is getting, I think this is a revert, where it now has the slow on autos, and will do a bit more damage. Obviously no crit stuff, but you still have the CDR and have an on-hit effect. Thor will now do a bit more damage, and Evening Star also randomly has a unique passive now, probably to make it more in line with the Bat sister that it has. And Squeaky Hammer, which is the auto attack, I believe, basic weapon, is now having more damage as well. Bats across the board are being buffed a little bit, no magic stick nerfs, very odd. And Asura dual swords are being buffed slightly outside Springham Autumn, which is being adjusted for the dual swords attack range increase. Nunchucks are getting the same old reworks with minus AP plus amp. Crossbow is getting very lightly nerfed, not even real nerfs. And Arcana in general, again, with the usual minus AP plus AP changes with some HP being moved around. If you guys want to check these out, then follow the screen. It's not really much to talk about, and there's a lot of lines there. Let's see, Shuriken, also same deal. Just a lot of random number changes to, account for their philosophy on time to kill, I suppose. Cards of Tyranny is probably the most interesting one, just because this is more crit chance for less crit strike damage, and yeah, just again, really lessening the impact of auto-attacking on these amp weapons and benefiting you more on spells. Not really sure why that's a thing. Two-Hand Sword is actually getting a pretty interesting rework. Monohoji Zhao and Dainsleif getting Omni Siphon instead of Lifesteal is huge for Debi Marlene because her spells wouldn't really proc Lifesteal. So if you want to build Not Smolder, you might have the option now. Really doubt it. And Sniper Rifle, the upgrade, again, auto attacks being nerfed, Tac 50, which is the lifesteal sniper getting buffed arguably. And Spear, weapon skill being buffed a very small amount, and then a bunch of the usual changes where auto attacking is less effective, and sometimes in exchange for more amps. So a lot of lines for changes that probably aren't very meaningful. Whip, same story. Camera, same story. Tonfa, same story. Throw, same story. This ending of the patch is really long for basically no reason. Let's see here. Twin Bow does now have lifesteal, which is funny considering that Twin Bow hasn't been used at all. Oh, and yes, actually, bows have had an interesting rework. So Ancient Bolt is being buffed for Rio for some odd reason, but Argiotoxis and Artemis are both being changed. Argiotoxis now has the halo effect. When you cast an ability in auto, you get way more damage. If you guys played before 1.0, you now have Kandala back in the form of Argiotoxis, and Artemis will now have Hex, which is pretty interesting. Yeah, just making bows a bit more interesting for the amp users. Aikion, which is the VF prosthetic section, is also getting buffed pretty interestingly. Basically, you will be forced to upgrade the original weapon with the usual mods you expect, but now you can upgrade it further with either Force Core or VF Blood Sample if you want to. The stat upgrades honestly aren't that impressive. You're just getting Tenacity or Omni-Siphon depending on which one you grab, but it is very interesting that they're giving Aikion another RNG sync. This means that you could actually run 5 VF Bloods on Aikion, so we'll see how that goes. Oh, there's so much on this patch. You guys have stuck with me, by the way. This is the longest rundown we've done all time. Anyways, for armor, we have a few changes. Turn-up coat, Sunset armor, Crusader armor, Commander's armor, Amazon's armor, Guardian suit, Blazing dress, all pretty much the same. Aoyai, Omerta, Elegant gown, Cabana, Queen of Hearts, Courtier, all pretty much the same. So we'll go down to the new armor called Tactical Armor. This is the collector's effect from League of Legends. Essentially, when you have more than 30 armor pen, which is a pretty difficult amount to get to, you will now instantly execute when you hit somebody with less than 6% HP, which is kind of terrifying. The stats are honestly pretty awful outside of that, but you do get a pretty cool effect. Phantom Jacket, small change. Blood Cloak, which is the amp tree chest piece, now has a unique effect, which is going to be a burn effect that scales off of your amp and does damage according to your enemy's max percent HP. So very scary stuff. This can be very strong very quickly, and you'll notice that this exact same effect called Decomposition will also be on Astronaut Helmet. Yeah, very interesting effect, probably the highlight of this season in my opinion. So hats, same thing, Banneret, Outlaw, Vigilante, Crusader's Helmet, Crystal Tiara, Tac Ops, Virginet, well, Pegasus. All minor changes depending on what Numberone thinks needs to be better or worse about it. Same thing with Tactical Visor, and Astronaut Helmets, again, getting a small rework just like Blood Coat did, and getting a small stat nerf for the Decomposition passive. Going on to arms, we have a bunch of reworks again. Creed, Nightingale, Minuteman's Headwear, Sports Watch, all very small changes, but Sword Stopper and also its upgrade called Centipede's Pauldron is getting a small rework where it has now HP and no more defense from basic attacks, so just a bit more flexible tankiness, but in the end the arms are all essentially the same except for Nightmare Nails, where you now need an oilcloth plus meteorite to get it. No one ever builds that, so I don't think it really matters. But once again, we do have a new arm piece called Helix. Again, if you played League of Legends, this will be the exact same as Black Cleaver. The application method is up to interpretation until we get our hands on it, just because individual attack can mean anything from skill plus autos to just autos. But essentially, it is defense shred. It gives you the phage effect where you go faster if you hit somebody, and gives you a pretty good stat spread. The real question for this is whether or not the defense shred stacks with other sources of defense shred like Frailty or Adriana, because if it doesn't, it'll be pretty whatever, but if it does, wow, that is incredible. And then a bunch of random changes here. Blunderbird getting a little buff, Maverick Runner, crampons, tackies, straight jackets, glacial shoes, mythical boots, taproots, all getting small changes, who cares. Food. This is actually interesting. So breakfast sandwich is being nerfed a pretty good amount, and meat is getting nerfed because of the carnivore sub-augment that we mentioned at the very beginning. So it will heal you 600 overall, 100 HP up front, and then 500 over the 18 seconds. With all that said, I believe that is all of the stuff in the patch notes. Again, very long because it's a very long patch. In retrospect, I've gone a lot faster through it because, again, a lot of nothing changes, but it is what it is. I will hopefully be streaming, or at least having my thoughts on the patch tomorrow, and we'll see how that goes. Whew, thank you guys for sticking around. I hope I get better. I hope you guys are all doing well. Hope you all have a good day or night wherever you are, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye bye.